Welcome to the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival podcast. I'm Paris Jackson, host of the newsfeed on Cascade PBS. True crime has become a popular craze. Television series, podcasts, books. So much of our media these days focuses on crime stories pulled from the headlines or efforts to crack unsolved mysteries. But the growing fandom raises many questions, particularly around the ethics of the genre. Does true crime harm victims' families in the name of mass entertainment? The New Yorker's Critics at Large podcast hosts Alexandra Schwartz, Vincent Cunningham, and Naomi Fry tapped colleague and author Patrick Radden Keefe to get his perspective at the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival in May. Keefe is an expert in telling nuanced stories about these unconscionable acts and the people who commit them. And the popularity of these stories surprises even him. Let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival. I'm Alex Schwartz, one of the hosts of Critics at Large from The New Yorker. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Naomi Fry and Vincent Cunningham. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
We're so excited to be here.
We are very excited to be here, and especially because today we are talking about true crime and the insatiable hunger that audiences have for stories about people who do or experience terrible things. There is no shortage of examples. I mean, I'm thinking of podcasts like Serial or My Favorite Murder, or of shows like Making a Murderer or Tiger King. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And as this genre has exploded in popularity, there's been more consideration of the ethics around it. So stories like these raise a lot of questions. You know, does true crime honor victims or does it exploit them? Which stories get told, which don't? Is it right that the families of victims have to relive these incredibly painful chapters of their lives for essentially our entertainment? So I would say that all of these concerns really come down to one big central question. Is there a right way to turn real-life tragedy into mass entertainment or art? So to help us answer that, we are getting help. Patrick Radden Keefe is our fellow staff writer at The New Yorker, and he's one of the true masters of crime writing. We are all big Patrick Radden Keefe fans. Do you guys have any favorites of examples of his work?
Yeah, I mean, Patrick is, the master of true crime. We love him. We love reading him. I mean, there's Empire of Pain, his book from, 3 years ago or so, in which he investigated the notorious Sackler family and their peddling of OxyContin to disastrous results, for one. Yeah.
And then there's Say Nothing, the story of a murder that happened in Northern Ireland during the time of the Troubles, which is actually now, I think to our point here, being turned into an FX show that's going to come out later this year.
Yeah, exactly. So we will get into all of that, and let's welcome Patrick Radden Keefe.
Yay!
Hey, Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
Hey, guys.
Hi,
Hello.
You didn't burst out of a cake.
I wanted to. We couldn't get the cake is late.
It's a lot cleaner this way. It's a lot neater this way.
Yeah.
So I think we can all say that true crime is an obsession in the culture right now. In fact, I have data to offer us about this. Earlier today, the three of us were at the Space Needle here in Seattle, and we approached a random sampling of fellow visitors to the Space Needle to ask them, do you like true crime? And I was a little bit, to be honest, skeptical of this exercise. I felt like, we'll lead some fun audio for our show. Every single one of them was like, yeah, I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Every single one.
We talked to somewhere between 5 and 10 people, I guess, and it was actually shocking because they all had like, oh, I love this and I love that, and they weren't just saying it. They were like, I listen to it every night before going to sleep. It plays as I'm slumbering, and we were like, wow, But it was astonishing, kind of the mass, kind of everyone saying how much they were a fan.
Yeah.
Well, I basically have two questions leading from this observation. One is kind of for all of us, and one is specifically for you, Patrick, but I'm going to put both of them to you, which is, what is the appeal of these stories for someone reading or watching them? And also, what is the appeal of writing them, of writing about crime? What does it let you do as a writer, that kind of story?
I'm a little confused at times about the intensity of the appeal. And when I look particularly at all the podcasts about true crime, all of the streaming stuff that you see, it can feel at times to me like there's a glut, like there's too much of it. Like there's a kind of sameness. And I sometimes wonder how it is that people have such a bottomless appetite for this stuff. I think some of it is that you can go back to the dawn of literature, and questions of good and evil have always fascinated us. I mean, people aren't, generally speaking, reading Paradise Lost these days, but these questions of the terrible things that people do, I think, are interesting, just fundamentally. I also think that there's a way in which, I often think to analogize about disaster movies or, zombie movies or what have you, these types of scenarios in which from the comfort of our living room, we watch a story of apocalypse, of something that is sort of even more terrifying than the moment we happen to be living through. Can you imagine? And I think that there's maybe an element of that in true crime as well, that there's something sort of strangely comforting about in your own life watching disaster befall someone else and kind of knowing that you're sort of secure. To answer your second question, I would sort of pivot, because I think that explanation I just offered would suggest that when you watch true crime, you're really kind of empathizing with the victim or the victim's family. You're sort of thinking, oh, look at those evil people who are so different from me, so alien for me. And for me as a writer, it's actually kind of the opposite, where what I'm really intrigued by is why do people do bad things? And what are the ways in which those people are not different from me, but actually similar to me? And so I have not, I haven't written much over the years about people who are kind of inexplicably just sort of pure evil, because those people aren't that intriguing to me. I mean, the thing I always think about is I wrote a story years ago. There was a mass shooter, a woman named Amy Bishop. And she'd been a professor at the University of Alabama. And in 2010, some of you may recall, she walked into a faculty meeting and shot 6 of her colleagues. And my editor called me and said, hey, do you want to write a story about that case? And initially I said no, because a mass shooter is not that interesting to me. I don't really care why she did it. Newsflash, like, she's a little bit nuts. And that's not actually a place that I feel the need to go. But then my editor said, there's a really interesting backstory here, which is when she was young, like a kind of college-age kid, she actually shot and killed her little brother with a shotgun. And there was only one witness to that shooting. It was their mother. And so their mother only had 2 kids, and she walked into the kitchen one day, and she saw her daughter shoot and kill her son. And the cops were on the way. And when they came, she said, I saw the whole thing. It was an accident. And the choice of that mother, right? You've just lost one child, and you may be about to lose the other. What do you say to the police? That, to me, was really intriguing, and that was something I wanted to understand. And in this case, I think in some ways that choice she made helped create a situation in which her daughter, all these years later, shot these other people. So that's what intrigues me most, is sort of getting up close as I can and trying to understand the ways in which some people deviate from conventional morality.
Yeah, you mentioned, I'm sorry, but you mentioned Milton before in Paradise Lost. I mean, I think you're on a continuum. He's look, there's Satan. If you're a true believer, then that's true crime. What happened here? Why has, Satan come to Earth to tempt man? And there you have Milton, and many years later, Patrick Radden Keefe trying to answer these questions.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes, the making of a murderer, Satan.
How far we've fallen.
Yes, indeed. Well, we want to take a deeper look at one of your recent pieces, The Oligarch's Son, because I think it really gets into these questions. This is a story that you recently published in the magazine, in The New Yorker. Tell us a little bit about the story. Maybe it would be great if you could give us a little synopsis of what it is, but also how, I'm super curious about how you came to it. And how you started reporting it.
Yeah, it came to me in a strange way. I mean, I find, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but when I go out looking for good stories, I never find them. And I just sort of look, and I don't come up with anything any good. And then when I just move through the world, occasionally incredible stories fall in my lap. And I was living in London over the summer because we were producing this series, Say Nothing. And I was on set one day, and there was a guy who was visiting the set. He was a guest of one of the directors, and we got to chatting. And he told me about a family he knew in London. They lived in Maida Vale, a nice neighborhood in West London. And they had a 19-year-old boy named Zach. And Zach had died in 2019. He was in a luxury building, a luxury apartment building on the Thames, and he went off the balcony and into the Thames, and he died. And after he died, his parents learned that he had had a kind of double identity. He had been a fabulist, and he'd been moving around London pretending that he was the son of a Russian oligarch. And he got mixed up with some people that turned out to be quite dangerous people, and he ended up dead. And the authorities had kind of looked at this and thought it was maybe a suicide, but it turns out that the moment that he went off the balcony, he'd been in that apartment with a guy who was a notorious gangster. And so the piece that I wrote was about the parents, actually. Matthew and Rochelle Brettler are their names, and how after their son died, it's a mystery in a way. They're both kind of coming to understand the circumstances of his death, but also in the process, they're coming to understand who their son had actually been in his life in a way that they didn't really fully grasp when he was alive.
Can I ask you to read an excerpt from the story to give people a sense?
You can indeed. I've got one queued up. If I can call it up on my phone. Here it is. So this is actually, it's sort of partway through the piece, but it's at the point where I met Matthew and Rochelle, the parents. In a chill rain last fall, I visited the Brettlers. I'd initially connected with them over the summer, and we'd since had several long and sometimes painful conversations about their son. The Maida Vale apartment is spare and modern. Rochelle writes about crafts and design, and the space was elegantly decorated and brightened by colorful glass vases. A framed snapshot on a bookshelf showed Zach and his brother Joe as little boys, dressed up in costumes at a school fair. Zach was a cute, fun goofball, Rochelle said. Both Brettler parents are now 61. Matthew is bespectacled, athletic, and bald. He has a conspicuously analytical mind and an amiable intensity, and he has coped with the devastation of losing a child by channeling his energies into investigating Zach's demise. Rochelle is petite with lively eyes and a tendency to smile even when she's relating a sad story. Joe drifted in and out as we talked. He's 25 with corkscrew curls and has a casually affectionate manner with his parents. In the 4 years since Zach's death, the family has had to confront the extent to which the boy they thought they knew had been living a double existence. Zach had always possessed a Walter Mitty quality. He had burnished his achievements, boasting to friends about his athletic prowess and his business prospects. Or he would play up his supposed connections to prominent people, falsely claiming, for instance, that he knew Virgil van Dijk, the captain of Liverpool Football Club. But none of the Brettlers had ever imagined that Zach might be moving about London, pretending to be someone else altogether.
It strikes me that this story, and the story that you told us before, this horrible story of a sort of fratricide, involve, crucially, as you mentioned, the parents. And it just strikes me as such a tough part of the job it must be. How do you talk, especially to parents and to family members to whom these horrible things have happened? And so, of course, being the chief character witnesses and the ones who are often kind of looking to you to solve things as well, this double role. How do you deal with that part of it, the dealing with these families?
It's really hard. I mean, I'm sure this is something we'll talk about, but I think the ethics of true crime are pretty fraught in a bunch of ways. And I don't exclusively write about crime, but I often do. And I'm very often thinking a lot about the victims. You know, often the person at the center of your story is already gone by the time you start writing. And I'm looking at the impact that loss has had to the people around them. And that's pretty raw and devastating. And I think that for a journalist, it creates these really interesting interactions because this was true with the Bretlers. It was actually true with the parents of Amy Bishop, the woman I mentioned before, who I spent time with. Sometimes there's a reluctance to talk initially, but when you go in, you're finding people in a way at their most isolated and vulnerable. They've been living with this anguish, and sometimes the people in their lives don't necessarily even kind of fully grasp the extent of it. And as a journalist, part of what I'm doing is I'm a good listener, and I will go in and if you talk, I will sit with you for 3, 4, 5, 7 hours and just kind of hear it all tumbling out. The trick is I'm not a therapist. I'm not a minister. And so it's important for me to remind people that we're doing this intimate thing here. You're telling me about the worst thing that happened in your life. But at a certain point, it's like I'm going to throw the shades open and all the sunlight's going to come in. And this conversation that we have is going to be reproduced in print. And I don't want people, when that moment comes, to feel betrayed by it or to feel like I misled them. And so I'm actually constantly, even in little ways, I will, if I'm recording the conversation, I'll periodically just reach out and just tap my phone to kind of ostensibly to make sure that it's still recording, but also just to kind of remind them, you are on the record here. And when I go away to write, I'm not going to be pulling punches. I'm not in PR. I'm not out here trying to be your ventriloquist. I'm going to tell the story as I see it, and I'm going to use everything that you've given me.
Do you find that you have to use different skill sets when you engage with, say, a victim's family, who are obviously these parents who have lost their son, as sympathetic characters, but then also in The Oligarch's Son and in general in your work, you deal with a lot of unsavory elements. You deal, in this story, for instance, you're investigating this London underground of kind of Russian-related mob figures, potentially, and so on, and you spend time with them and listen to them, and it kind of strikes me that these are two very different types of engagement, but perhaps as you report, you find that you are using kind of a similar manner in both cases, or not, maybe.
Yeah, I think it varies. I do think to some extent and probably different journalists are different. I often think about Truman Capote, our predecessor at The New Yorker, author of In Cold Blood. And it's funny because I think different reporters work in different ways. For me, I'm always trying to close the distance between myself and the person that I'm talking with. Find some common idiom, meet them where they are. But if any of you have seen the terrific film Capote, which was made about him writing In Cold Blood, or if you know anything about this story, he goes to the high plains of Kansas to report on this murder. And Truman Capote is this tiny, very gay, extremely he's just a big New York personality of a sort that they did not often see in this corner of Kansas. And he shows up and he didn't dilute who he was or try and seem like them. And strangely, I think sometimes that can work, because I do think that for people, it's as if an alien has just descended on planet Earth and is tell me your story. And I try and meet people where they are. And sometimes I've interviewed murderers and drug runners and any number of other people. I've written a lot about the Sinaloa drug cartel and Chapo Guzman. I've written about IRA paramilitaries who've, bombed cities. And it's not that I suspend judgment at all, because I don't. But I do think that it's, to go back to the kind of the Milton Paradise Lost thing, I don't think it helps anyone if I look at those people, I sort of fold my arms and I look at those people and I say, look at those evil people. They're so different from you and me. We have nothing in common with them. To kind of demonize these people and slam my fist on the pulpit, I don't think sheds any light on anything. And so I am, as often as I can, trying to understand why they do why they do the things that they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, Patrick, you said before that you're not a therapist and you're not a minister. It's funny because I think even reporting, you'd be surprised about how many non-crime subjects or not even emotionally fraught subjects a journalist can get into and then feel like a therapist in a weird way. You are listening to people tell you big things about their lives, and you want that. You want to reel it out. But something you are is an investigator. And I feel like that is kind of a tricky area with some of these crime stories where investigators who represent the law, which is not what you represent as an investigator, have failed. This is something that happened in the story of the oligarch's son, where police failed to come up with substantive answers, and this family is left reeling. It certainly happened with Say Nothing, where, the book expands to take in the troubles in Northern Ireland in the 70s, but it begins with the murder, the unsolved murder of a mother of 10, and by the end of the book, we know who the murderer was through your investigation. So,
you literally solved like a cold case.
Patrick Keefe solved a cold case murder. It's just true. Give him a hand. It's come on. This isn't easy work. This isn't a walk in the park. So what I want to know is, that actually puts you in a very fraught position with your subjects, because I would have to imagine that they feel a lot maybe riding on what you find out and on what you discover. How do you approach that aspect of things? You can't promise to know, in this case, to find out what happened to Zach Brettler, but I know that you as a journalist want to. So where do your interests converge and where do they diverge?
And also we should mention that you're now expanding that piece into a book.
Yeah, the investigation
for
continues,
the magazine into a book that you're now reporting out and working on.
A couple of things. So one is that I think the role of the investigative journalist is sort of interesting, right? Because on the one hand, we have, there's all kinds of ways in which we're at a disadvantage vis-a-vis the authorities. Like, I don't have subpoena power. I can't force anyone to tell me anything.
God, wouldn't that be good, though?
Oh, it'd be the best.
Imagine if we had subpoena power. I would love that.
I should say, just parenthetically, I recently met with somebody who I will not name, a source of mine in London, who, is somebody who maybe occasionally over the years has resolved disputes in a physical way. And we were talking about the reporting that I'm doing, and there are some individuals who won't talk to me or won't tell me what I want to know. And this guy very generously was like, I'll tell you what, the next time you want to talk to him, just bring me along with you. And I sort of gave a little speech about, journalistic ethics and how actually having having somebody who might do them bodily harm next to me is probably not the best way to get people to talk with you. But I
think if you did that, we'd be doing a true crime show about you.
So about me, exactly. Yeah.
God forbid.
Right. Defrocked investigative journalist, Radden Keefe. In the case of Say Nothing, I did it's a book about this terrible abduction and murder of a mother of 10 in 1972, a woman named Jean McConville. And at the end of 4 years of researching this, I figured out who had actually pulled the trigger. And after a lot of consultation with lawyers in the US and Ireland and Northern Ireland and London, I named this person in the book. And the person had never been identified before and is still alive. But they weren't arrested. Because, I think for a very good reason, the police have a higher burden of proof than I do. And so I would never have published the name if I wasn't 100% certain that I was right, because it would be a grotesque thing to accuse somebody of. But at the same time, this was a cold case murder from 1972, no living witnesses, apart from the person I accused, no physical evidence. And so nothing happened with it. So I'm very mindful of that, and I think the hard thing after Say Nothing is that in a way, there is a certain extent to which my reputation precedes. Like if somebody Googles me, they do know that about me. And so in the case of the Brettlers, from the first time I met with them, I said, if I write about this, I need you to know it may be a mystery that I don't solve. And I don't want you to talk with me on the assumption that I'm going to crack the case, because it puts a great deal of pressure on me, but also because it would be disingenuous of me, right, to make a promise that I'm not going to be able to deliver on. So the one thing I can tell you is I will get into this and throw everything I have at it and try and shed some new light on the situation. And in this case, I think the authorities had done such a terrible bungling job trying to get to the bottom of the death the brother's son, that almost any effort on my part would be an improvement on what the police had done.
We'll have more from Critics at Large live at the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival after this.
At Amazon, there's a way up for anyone because there's something for everyone. Like Jessica, who completed free technical training programs and is getting her bachelor's with Amazon's prepaid tuition.
Even if you have no knowledge or no experience in IT, Amazon has the tools and the resources to teach you. I've been promoted 3 times, and it's been a significant boost in pay for me.
Free technical training programs at Amazon move full-time and part-time employees into higher-paying jobs. Visit aboutamazon.com for more info.
They always say life's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So why not travel comfortably? Alaska Airlines has the most legroom in premium class, with 4 inches more than standard main cabin seats and more than any other U.S. legacy airline. Plus, when you book a premium class seat, you can also enjoy early boarding and complimentary beer, wine, and cocktails on board most flights. It's time to enjoy the journey. Upgrade to premium class today on alaskaair.com.
BECU. You've heard the name, seen the letters. But what does BECU stand for? Simply put, not-for-profit BECU stands for people. For charting your own path. For choosing what's right for members instead of what's profitable for someone else. Because they are the reason our credit union exists. So we do everything in our power to help them reach their financial goals. BECU. Power in people. All Pacific Northwest residents are eligible to join. Federally insured by NCUA.
Do you think you have to have a certain type of personality or character to be a true crime reporter? Because to me, it seems like you have to have a certain sang-froid. Like, it just...
Nomi, you could do it.
No.
Yes.
No,
I think you could.
I think the technical term is balls of steel.
Balls of steel. I was going to say that, and then I was like, we're on stage
I saw you
here.
wanted to,
I know, I really wanted to. But it strikes me as, first of all, scary. I mean, we do know that when you investigated the Sacklers and the OxyContin, the scandal and so on, you had people following you, and that's just one. And when you meet with these characters who have been known to resolve disputes in a physical manner and so on. So just even on the level of that, it seems to me like you need to have a kind of like a very particular kind of attitude towards your work, or kind of, I don't know, does that make sense?
It does.
Or,
I'm pretty careful. We have a colleague, Luke Mogelson, who's like in the trenches in Ukraine right now, getting bombed and writing about it. And that's a level of bravery and commitment that I don't have. I'm not covering war. I'm pretty careful. My wife is even more careful and has a strong point of view about what stories I do and don't do. We had a funny experience, this is a couple of years ago now, where I got a tip about a potential story involving the Russian mafia. And my wife and I have adjacent home offices. So, in the morning I go up to mine, she goes to hers. But there's only one printer and it's in my office. And so she periodically comes in when she has to print something out. And I had gotten this tip, and it was about this Russian mafia story. And so I printed out a whole bunch of stuff to look at later. And then I went off into town to do some interviews. And when I came home, the stuff that I had on the printer in the tray was on my desk. Somebody had removed it from the printer and put it on my desk. And on the top of the stack was this, it was a printout of a text message that somebody had sent, like a threatening text message, which was written in Cyrillic, and then there was a photo of a dead body. It was like a warning that somebody had given. So so there's this printout of this text message on top of this little stack of paper, and somebody had scrawled in Sharpie on top of this, no. So I have my in-house counsel who occasionally
okay, well that's really
steers me away from certain stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it may also be true, Patrick, is it not, that your young son once FaceTimed with a member of the Sinaloa drug cartel?
This is also true. This was a great, this is a very funny, very
funny, haha, yeah.
Very funny, haha. This is going back years ago. So I have 2 sons, and at the point where the younger one was about 3 or 4, and the older one was about 7, we would go on Saturday mornings. I would take them because the older boy was doing kids karate of a sort that some of you are probably familiar with, but just like all these little children and their gis, going kia, and the younger guy would come, and during the karate class, I would sit cross-legged on the floor watching with the other parents, and the younger guy would sit on my lap, and I would give him my phone, and to entertain himself, he would text my wife just long strings of emojis, because that was what, it's like you're 4, and this is the way he could spend a full hour doing this, just sending these long strings of little pictures to my wife. So we're sitting there, the older kids are doing karate, the little guy is sitting on my lap doing this. I'm sort of tuned out, not really, just kind of lost in my own thoughts. And suddenly I hear this dissonant noise, something that doesn't really make sense. And I look down over his shoulder at the phone in his hand, and I see he has somehow opened FaceTime. And he is FaceTiming with this former lieutenant from the Sinaloa drug cartel, who was one of my sources. So it's like a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and my son is looking at this guy, and this guy is looking at my son, the kind of cherubic little face that fills the frame on his phone. I honestly don't know which one of them was more surprised. And I frantically kind of switched it off and later texted him very apologetically and said, I'm so terribly sorry. That was my son, all an accident. And he wrote back something like, no problem, cute kid.
And you're like, is that a threat?
Right, it's like, cute kid.
Oh dear. So guys, I want to widen our aperture a little bit. I mean, I'd like to know, first of all, from both of you, what your relationships are to true crime. My own is a bit conflicted.
Yeah.
Because I want to just come clean and say, there are moments when the snobby side of me is like, oh, no. All those people who are just gobbling up these stories of murder and one after another, and they can't get enough, and the more gruesome, the better, and they're going to sleep listening to the stories, and they're waking up. I'm not like that. And then, of course, something like The Jinx comes on,
and you're like,
yes,
give me more.
Yeah, and and I'm just glued to my seat, thinking, well, of course, I'm an investigator. I've got my investigative cap on. I bet I can figure out what happened with Robert Durst. And so clearly, there's something about these stories that appeal to us for very good reason. I mean, we're dealing with the extremity of human experience, whether it's about someone who commits crime or someone who is the victim of a crime or the family of a victim of the crime. And we want to look into these dark corners. There's, whether true or not, this is where great art comes from. So what do you guys think is behind some of this? I mean, what's your own relationship to true crime?
I mean, I will say, to me, it's interesting culturally. I can't say I'm like a rabid, like I don't listen to true crime podcasts or anything like that. But there are certain texts in the genre, let's say, that I think are important to me on a cultural level. I mean, in Cold Blood that Patrick just mentioned, the Capote, it's just for me, it's like important as like I see it as these like moments of portraiture of American culture. So that sort of like this Kansan, story of these 2 criminal drifters who commit this inexplicable crime. But then it's not just that; it's a portrait of the whole community, which is just kind of like touching and beautifully written. I love Helter Skelter, the, Bugliosi book about the Manson murders, because that was really like a mystery, It was a mystery. So, but beyond the satisfaction of that and the solving of that, there's just this whole cast of characters. There's this portrait of culture at a certain extremely volatile moment in American history. And so I do think that there are these, I wouldn't put myself as this like, gobbler of willy-nilly sort of true crime stories, but I am interested in it when it's done very well and when it kind of expands our view of what culture is at a particular moment.
I think it can also be used to sort of poke at or stoke our own senses of history. Sometimes it's telling a story that you remember, right? That you've digested at different stages of its life, right? I remember when this was on the news, and then I remember
like OJ, for instance.
Exactly.
That's the classic example.
That's right. Or just like even more simply, as a New Yorker, I've always loved to watch Law and Order, because it's just ripped from the headline stuff that I remember, and it's always so thinly veiled. I remember when it's like the horrible domestic violence case between Chris Brown and Rihanna, and I don't remember what the names were, but it was like Briss Crown and Kiana. You know, this is the thing that you remember, right? And so it's interesting to reinvestigate our feelings about something once we've had the distance of time. I do think that that's sort of part of the appeal.
Patrick, are you not just a practitioner, but also a fan, just like as a...
Yeah, exactly. I'm not only the president of the Hair Club, I'm also a member. Yeah, I am. I mean, I think there are, I probably share a little bit of Alex's snobbery in terms of what I go in for. Some of you may have noticed there was, I don't know when it was, a year ago or so, maybe not even, Netflix released this series about Jeffrey Dahmer. And it was massive. It was like the biggest opening of anything ever on Netflix. And there, I just didn't get it. It was well done, but I just felt as though it just felt kind of grisly. And it was interesting. I mean, a lot of Dahmer's victims were young men and boys of color. And there is some interesting sociological stuff in the series about the way in which this is actually probably part of the reason that he continued to commit these crimes for as long as he did and wasn't apprehended. But to me, the price you have to pay in sociology, anthropology, kind of enriching our understanding of something beyond the crime itself, it's a fairly high bar. And so to me, the Dahmer thing I was mystified that it did as well as it did. However, that was produced by Ryan Murphy, and an earlier Ryan Murphy series, which is The People versus O.J. Simpson, the dramatization, I thought was fantastic. And to go to what Vincent was saying, I think actually it was the passage of time that we were able to look back. We were both able to look back with the passage of time and see the ways in which, maybe things we didn't notice at the time, but then also, if you remember when that series came out more recently, there are all kinds of issues we were dealing with in terms of policing and race and so forth. I mean, the resonances in our present moment were so profound that I thought revisiting it in that series, and then also the really incredible, if any of you have seen it, but the ESPN documentary, O.J. Made in America, which is just brilliant. An astonishing multi-part documentary.
Ezra Edelman.
Ezra Edelman's film. I think that I love that stuff. I mean, I really go in for that. So I think that when people approach things in a kind of thoughtful, sensitive way, that absolutely is using the whole bag of tricks, narrative tricks, to seduce you and pull you in and play on your fears and your anxieties. I'm fine with all that. But I do think that you want to think about the fact that there are real victims, their families are still out there. You want to kind of tell the stories with a certain amount of sensitivity and rigor. And then I think ideally you want to illuminate something larger about the world and not just sort of fixate on the, as is very often the case, it's almost a cliche, right? The kind of dead white woman who you meet in the first reel, and then you never really advance much beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not immune. I just want to be clear when I talk about my snobbery. Like, I'm not immune to the exquisite rush of like the breath on the back of your neck feeling.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot to be said for watching or reading or listening to something that heightens your senses in this intense way. I mean, you're talking about a narrative bag of tricks. Like, one reason, frankly, why crime can be a very useful thing to tell those bigger stories about the society we're in or the moment in the culture is because of suspense. And, there's no stronger narrative tool than that. Like, I'm thinking basically on your recommendation, Patrick, I've started reading The Lost Girls, which is Robert Kolker's book about the investigation and and the victims of the Gilgo Beach murders. That book was written in 2013 or published in 2013, and the murderer was found this year. So that book came out almost a decade before the murderer was named. And I was starting to read this book thinking, well, how is he going to do this? Because I know that he doesn't know who did this. Nobody knew who did this until they pulled out this, horrifying architect from his creepy little house and named him. And the way he does it is he begins with each of the victims by giving you a kind of snapshot view into their lives as young people, as children, then as young women. And this to me, I found brilliant and moving and very unsettling. After he's gone through each of the victims, he returns to them, but this time they were all working as sex workers, as escorts. This is how they all got met their horrible end. He returns to the people they became, their aliases, moving into this next chapter of their lives. It's like you can see this transformation happening for each of these people. And one obvious thing it does is recenter the victims and not just the grisly nature of the crime. But you get a deeper view into the stories, the human aspects of what is going on. And at the same time, I thought to myself, I cannot read this before I go to bed, not because I'm afraid of someone bursting in through the window, but because you have this God's eye point of view over what happened to these other people. And there's something so unsettling about that, being forced into this kind of intimacy with the victims, not even with the doer of evil, and just kind of knowing something they don't. I think there's something seductive about that as the reader or the, audience, and there's also something kind of horrible about that.
Well, it's a kind of God's eye view, right? It's a sort of surveillance and almost complicity, because it's like you almost want to yell don't turn around, he's there with a knife, But
who's saying that? I don't say that. Sometimes I do.
But you also care.
One can't.
You care. Yeah, you care. Right.
Yeah. And I feel as though, I think it's a brilliant book, and it's called Lost Girls, and would recommend it to all of you. But I think in a weird way, I don't know what the conversations were when Bob Kolker wrote that book, but I could imagine when you're pitching that as a book to a publisher that they say, well, we haven't found the killer, so what's the book, right? And I think the brilliance of it was that actually that, I'm sure this was the intention from the beginning, right? But it's not actually about that. It's about the people that this happened to, and the kind of level of engagement that you feel with their lives. I get the sort of slightly eerie God's eye, I know that this person is going to die, but I think you feel that in your gut in a way that you wouldn't with just the kind of cheap scare of somebody who you meet and you only know them for 5 minutes before they're killed.
I do wonder, your experience of this, working on something that's a magazine piece and then having it be a book, and then, working on it for the screen, having, understanding as you do, maybe uniquely, the life cycle of these stories. One, what do you think the entertainment industry wants and expects out of these stories? And then two, maybe has there ever been a time when, you're on a set or something, and you notice, or you're in a writer's room or something like that, and you notice that, the way that things are going are straying wildly from your original intention in a way that makes you feel different ethically about it than you did when you were writing the story. Have you had to intervene and say, that's not what this is, or?
Yeah, it's a hard thing. I think that I have thought about this a lot in the last few years because a number of things that I've worked on are in the process of or have been turned into dramas. And it's strange, right? Because for me, the North Star is fact. It's that everything is factual. And it is sometimes the case that people aren't crazy about what I publish or that they don't want me to be writing about it at all. But I sort of move forward, and to me, it feels important to tell these stories, but I'm always, the constraint for me is always that I go out and I do the work and I tell a story that's true. And the hard thing about drama is that if you do a very faithful adaptation of almost any book, it is going to be a bad adaptation. That the process of turning something into a televised drama is just innately, if it's going to be good, you actually need to sort of rough it up a bit and condense certain sections and expand certain others and take certain narrative shortcuts. And that's a thing that as an author is it's a tricky thing, right? Because you're sort of there on the sidelines watching them do this. I am pretty good about just making peace with the idea that there's like a cultural product that I create with my hands and I put it out in the world and that's mine. And then sometimes there's an adaptation of it that is just a more complicated thing. What I have tried to do, particularly in the case of Say Nothing, is I'm a producer on Say Nothing, and I have tried to be there. I was there on set. I was trying to sort of say, we want to get this as right as possible. There are some shortcuts you can take, absolutely, because it's necessary. And then there are others that I would say, let's not do that, because you have to remember that this is a real story about real people. They're alive. They're out there.
Let me ask an enormous question because we have 1 minute left, and there's nothing better than taking 60 seconds to try to answer a huge question. Yeah. You know, based on our informal yet highly scientific poll at the Space Needle earlier, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that people are not tired of true crime, that the appetite is as big as ever. Where do you guys think the genre should go?
Let's let Patrick
The clock is ticking. Let's get some answers.
Come on, 45 seconds.
Yes.
If I knew that, I'd be a very rich man, and I wouldn't be.
Well, I'll just say, okay, let me, attempt. I would like to see a little less of the gleeful, celebration of the murderistas or whatever it is. So Murderinos. Thank you very much. I really like the show Only Murders in the Building because I think it kind of gently sends up this culture of just absolutely salivating to get your hands on the next bloody story. A strong dose of ethics never hurts, right?
Never hurt anyone.
Yeah. Patrick.
Hear, hear.
Yay!
All right, well, I'll just spoil Paradise Lost for everybody who doesn't know what happens and just let you know that Satan did it. So on that note, we are officially out of time. Patrick Radden Keefe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, it's fun.
And thank you all for being a part of the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you, Alexandra, Vincent, Naomi, and Patrick for the talk. This episode of the Cascade PBS Ideas Festival podcast was produced by Isaac Kaplan-Woolner. The live event was produced by Jake Newman and Ann O'Dowd. You can subscribe to this feed wherever you listen to podcasts, and whatever platform you're listening on, please review us. We'd love to know what you think of the show. For the latest political, environmental, and culture news from the Pacific Northwest, visit cascadepbs.org. And if you would like to support the work we do, whether it's live events we host or the in-depth reporting we do every day, you can also go to cascadepbs.org. In addition to supporting our journalism, members receive complete access to the on-demand programming of Cascade PBS. I'm Paris Jackson. We'll be back next week with a live session from KCRW's Left, Right, and Center podcast.